Hi everybody, I am Ben Wright Human, cartoonist extraordinaire, and welcome to part 2 of my live streaming of the drawing of CosPain strip number 95, TASE Me Bro. Get right into it. I did the line art and penciling on this past Friday, and now it's time for the somewhat tedious but absolutely worth it task of coloring. I'm going to start. I can't even remember who I just grabbed. It's been that kind of day, that kind of week, that kind of everything. Grab this guy first. I'm still getting used to the setup on my brand new computer, so there may be some hiccups as I'm doing commands. The weird thing on this computer is that for whatever reason, I have a Lenovo ThinkPad P1, and it's great in a lot of ways. The one big place where I'm getting hung up is that for whatever reason, they switched the function and the control button. All layers, no anti-alias. And so whenever I'm doing commands, I very often am hitting the wrong thing, which for some things is not a big deal, just kind of annoying. It's a much bigger problem when I'm dealing with copying and pasting or saving, because sometimes it's just not taking. And I don't realize it when that happens because there's not necessarily a big queue for any of that. Where's that hole? So my language may get more scatological than usual if it ends up being more difficult than expected. Now, one of the things that I did want to talk about today, because I happened to watch a couple videos on it right before I came on. So I watch a series called Game Theory. The Game Theorists are a channel run by a guy on YouTube known as MacLeod. And a lot of it is just silly theories about games, and he comes up with stuff about how Mario is a sociopath and breaks down the evidence. Or the other famous one, he talks about Majora's Mask and how there's a lot of evidence that Link is dead, and this is either his afterlife or what he experiences in the moments of death. And it's interesting, the theories he breaks down. He's done a lot of stuff with Five Nights at Freddy's, which is a very interesting series that I may talk about at some point. But what was interesting about this video was he actually talked about copyright law. And for people unfamiliar with the subject, no wonder, I have it down to 1 pixel. For people unfamiliar with the subject or who are not particularly versed in it, it's a good basic reference that he ends up giving for people who put content online. And he's specifically talking about fan art in this. If you can track down the video, I highly recommend it. There are actually 2 videos that he did. One where he talks more directly about what art he uses as a YouTube channel, because sometimes he does use official art or fan art with permission and things like that. And he talks about how sometimes you make mistakes and you end up grabbing something that you didn't have the rights to. He talks about how that can happen, how he tries to avoid it, and what other YouTubers should do to try to avoid it. And he also talks to artists about what you can do to make sure that this stuff doesn't happen as much to you. It was an interesting series of videos. I recommend them for anyone who does creative stuff online. If you're doing videos, if you're doing comics like I'm doing, if you're doing fan art, even if you're not trying to make money off of it, if you're just trying to be casual, look up the Game Theory videos that came out today, 3/31/2019, and give them a look, because I think they could be very beneficial when you're trying to figure out what exactly you're doing on this crazy internet thing. Just making sure I remember to get all those panels. So I actually have been doing fan art for a long time. It's one of the things that when I was first learning to draw digitally, that's one of the things I was messing with, because when you go to conventions, you come across a lot of fan art. And I know a lot of people who have serious reservations about this kind of thing. For anyone who, for whatever reason, does not know what I'm talking about, fan art is when you make art of a licensed character, or a character that is someone else's intellectual property, and you're not claiming ownership of that character. You're just saying, I am also a fan. And this is something that really has become much bigger in the age of the internet. I'm sure it existed before that. I'd love to find Victorian fan art. I'm sure it's out there. But it's really thrived on the internet and has become one of the major things that anyone who is in fan circles encounters. And when I first started getting involved with conventions, back when I was just an attendee, that's where I first really started seeing and getting into fan art, because it's an interesting, you're into all this stuff and you see artists who are creating really interesting work based on these projects. And in general, people in this country do turn a blind eye to the fact that it's fan art. This, in my opinion, is a good policy, because creators who attack fans quickly find they have no fans. But it's also something that you have to be very careful with. There's a perception that as soon as something is on the internet, it belongs to everybody. And with some things, I could understand that. And there are places where you can put stuff and say, anyone can use this. I was talking to someone today online who put a bunch of thematic music for Dungeons and Dragons online. And he set it up on a YouTube channel and has a website set up and says, all this stuff is available. And I messaged him because I am thinking about streaming a D&D campaign, and I asked, is this music royalty free? Like, is there some kind of credit you specifically would want on it if I were to end up using it? And he responded back saying, yeah, that's sort of the plan. Like, let me know what you're thinking. I can send you high-res stuff, and I just want some kind of credit. And the problem is, there are people who are willing to do that, and more power to doing that kind of thing. But if you want to make sure that people are crediting you correctly, you need to have a system in place for this. Now, I've started using music when I'm doing the replays of this. I'm guessing most people are going to see this on YouTube, because currently the chat's empty, which is a pretty normal thing for my videos. But on YouTube, there's an opening and ending piece of music that is by a guy named Kevin MacLeod, credit at the end of this and in the comments below. And that is royalty-free music, but he has very clear things on his website about how it can be used and what you need to do to properly credit it, which I do. But if you don't have that, it can kind of make things a mess. And especially if you want to point people's attention back to you, and say, hey, you can get more of it if you come to my site and things like that. It's a good way it's something you do want to pay attention to. So when it comes to fan art, it's funny because I've been really wanting to get to the point, like, to me, I will feel like I have made it as a cartoonist when someone makes fan art of a character I created. And I'm not talking about a friend making it, because I could just say, hey, I don't know, I have a lot of cartoonist friends. Say, I could ask my friend Angela Boyle, who's a cartoonist out in D.C., or not D.C., what am I saying, Washington State, to, do fan art of all my characters. that's something I could just get up and do tomorrow. What I'd much rather is someone I don't know who has read this, really likes it, and does fan art of one of my comics. I don't know how well fan art would work for something like CosPain, but I don't know, maybe the graphic novel I have in the works, Letters of the Devil, if people happen to come across the first volume of that and make fan art, I'd be like, hey, that's really cool. Oh, there's where the hole is. What I really want to see is cosplay of some of my characters. Again, probably not happening with CosPain. That is not especially since it's people in normal clothes some of the time, but the rest of the time they're actually dressed up as fan costumes and things like that. And actually, that gets into another point. One thing that I work hard on with this comic, many of the costumes are inspired by something else, inspired by a game or inspired by I don't know, anime, comics. Sometimes I've done a few things referencing Critical Role, but one of the important things for me is I'm never exactly recreating it. I'm trying to change it enough so that in the event that anyone looks at my work and says, hey, that is obviously referencing blank, I can say, yeah, but it's not actually blank. It's a parody. When I first was working on this comic, when I was first coming up with the idea, I talked to one of my instructors from the Center for Cartoon Studies, Stephen Bissett, and said, because Steve talks a lot about the legality of what we do and how to make sure your ass is covered. And I asked him, if I'm doing something like this, what do I need to do to make sure that I am covered? Because it's people dressing up as licensed characters, and I'm drawing people dressed as those characters. Is that enough of a parody? And he said, here's the trick. If you have someone who looks like Batman, just call him Barf Man. That was his advice. Like, I've written across the front, Barf Man. I was like, okay, I can go even farther than that, so I should be fine. I'll go through and do the mouths later. Let's get her taken care of. Nope. But yeah, this is a dicey area. There's a lot of misinformation out there. If you are starting out in a field like this, my biggest advice to you is don't put all your eggs in fan art. There are some people who do that, who do everything they do is fan-related properties. And honestly, those people can make a lot of money. But you have to be careful because every once in a while you get burned. If you ever get a cease and desist and it is a fan art property, take it down. Don't try to fight it. Don't get mad at someone protecting their own intellectual property. And also, if you see other people doing fan stuff of your work, just make sure everything's getting credited well. That gets into another important point. When you're putting stuff online, there's something that happens much too often and is a significant problem. Okay, where's the hole? There we go. I need to check something. Okay, that's the problem. What's my tolerance at? Problem solved. See, all these little settings that got changed when I switched computers. But yeah, one of the big problems that all artists have when they put their work online is credit getting stolen. It is a huge problem on the internet. And again, this goes to the perception that everything on the internet is free to everybody. And The only real when this comes up, the examples that bother me the most are when people actually remove watermarks and signatures and things like that, which you do see. I see a lot of images on Reddit, and I remember recently I saw one where the signature was in an obvious spot, and for whatever reason, the person posting it, okay, I don't want to be slanderous. I should clarify. The version of the photo that they posted, I don't know if they got it somewhere where that had already been done, but it very clearly had the identifying stuff for the artist blacked out. And you can't be doing that. But as a creator, you have to know that's going to happen. CosPain is going to end up somewhere crazy, I hope, in some ways, because that'll mean that people are paying enough attention to steal my stuff. But when that goes somewhere that it wouldn't normally be, and someone has removed the identifying information on it, I need to be prepared for that stuff. So it's something you have to pay attention to. The biggest thing you can do is make sure that not only is your name on there when you post it anywhere, but copyright information is there. This is something that a lot of people don't entirely understand, but one of the most important things in American copyright law. By the way, I should throw out here, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a legal expert. This is from my experience doing all this. So do not use me as your legal defense, but it is a good thing. If you have real questions about this, talk to legal experts. But one of the basic things that I will say, and this is based on having worked as a cartoonist for a number of years now, is the most basic way you can protect your work is writing your copyright on there. And there's no reason not to just write copyright, year, your name in some way. It can even be your signature. It doesn't have to be super clear, but just make sure you have that there. Because while it doesn't afford you all protections, in the US, as long as you have that written on the image, you claim basic copyright. In the event that things go to a court of law, you might want to have an officially registered copyright, which you can do very easily. It just costs a little bit of money. So generally, I've submitted a copyright for CosPain. I did it when I created the first mini comic collection because I decided that is enough strips that I can start the copyright process. So I have, I paid the money, I submitted it, and now there's a copyright in the US government that says this series belongs to me, and pretty much all the characters I create are therefore covered. I may resubmit that soon since I'm getting close to 100 strips, but that's the basics of that. But still, every single strip that I put out there, I write copyright, the year, and my name. In fact, it's written in 2 places. I don't have a signature on here yet. I always do the signature at the very end, but I'll show the other copyright that I have written on here in just an instant. As soon as I've finished. Fill that in. All right. Actually, here it is. Copyright 2019, Benjamin Wright Human, all rights reserved. Just having this on here grants so much protection. Now, here's the tricky thing. It's in the margin, as you can see. This would be really easy for someone to edit out. That's why I also have my signature with the copyright information when I finish up everything. And worst case scenario, I can very easily prove I made this first. So it's important that you keep yourself covered, that you pay attention to the possible eventualities your stuff can get stolen. And it's funny because I've seen people who argue, like when credit's been stolen this way, and then they try to defend themselves saying they're in the right for stealing this work. And I remember my favorite argument is when people say, have you ever used the internet? This is what happens. And it's like, just because a crime happens doesn't make it not a crime. And it's an important thing to look at because there are a lot of people who feel like anyone who fights against copyright infringement like this is the man. And the truth is, a lot of times, the person you're hurting is the little guy, the creator who is sitting in his office or her office or their office and is working very, very hard to put out content, to create something that other people will like, and you're taking it and you're taking away the credit, you're taking away the acknowledgement that they put that much work into it. And like I said, it's something that creators do have to get used to, that is going to happen, but it's not something that should happen. So again, this whole thing does get very dicey. I know that I've done a lot of fan art as just as an example of Critical Role. And Critical Role very much encourages their fan art community. There are great ways that this thing can be handled. I'm just saying that it is something you need to be careful about. Oh, I'm already at the top of this. Do the pants. Oh, that needs to be filled in. All right. I don't mean for that to become a rant, but I happen to just see something on it. And it's an important topic for people in creative fields. Another thing that I should mention with it, by the way, I have a friend who talked to me about why she hated fan art. And one of the things she said was that if someone else creates a fan art piece of your work and you don't fight it, you could lose the copyright on your property. And I don't know where she heard this, and it is not correct. If you can demonstrate that you're the one that created this, you're usually pretty good, especially if you've registered a copyright. But if you've registered a copyright and someone else makes fan artwork, they do not all of a sudden hold your copyright. I don't know where that opinion came from. It's tough because a lot of the information out there is based on what someone found on the internet. I'm getting mine from, honestly, I mentioned it before, Steve Bissett. Steve is, for those of you who don't know, is a cartoonist who has been working professionally in comics since, Steve, if you ever see this and I get this wrong, I apologize, but I want to say the late 70s. He worked with Alan Moore and John Tottlebane on Swamp Thing when they broke the code. He's one of the co-creators of the character Constantine. So he's got some serious credentials, but he does a lot of independent publishing. He has a comic series called Tyrant that he published himself and got all out there himself. And he's the one that gave me a lot of this information. So I consider him, he's a very smart guy, very reliable, and that is my source on all of that. When I do I guess this is a reminder to myself later when I'm editing this, when I do the version of this for YouTube, I will include the links for the game theory videos in the comments below. Maybe pop up an annotation right. I get here. Nope. Here. Yep. Okay. Now I'm going to have to do it or I'll look like a crazy person. Not that I don't already, because I am, as usual, talking into the void. So, figuring out, figuring out copyright craziness is one of the tougher parts of this entire job.